This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, Season 10, Episode 15. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network of shows brought to you by HK. Today is Thursday, October 3rd, 2024, as of recording of this episode. And I am your host, Riley Bowman, and joined today by co-host Brian Doc McLaughlin.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you doing?
Excellent. It is a gorgeous day. Fall is on its way in. The leaves are changing, and I need to be outside and in it, I think.
I feel that. There's a red maple just down a couple houses from me. I love red maples.
Yeah.
The leaves just went red, and it's such a beautiful, beautiful color. I have a white maple in my backyard, so all I do is turn, it's a nice yellow, not quite gold though, So they just turn yellow and then they fall off.
Yeah. If anybody's out there and you're thinking about moving to Colorado, don't. But it's gorgeous here. It is beautiful, especially in the fall. We got all the aspens are already changing. That's gonna be fantastic. I love Colorado.
Last weekend I think was good. This weekend should also be really good if you want to get out into the mountains and see some amazing fall colors. This would be the time to do it. Because I think probably maybe the weekend after that it might be a little bit too late and things will be gone.
Well, I want to see you do some photography in some of that areas. That would be cool. See some of the stuff you might take.
I'd love to, but I don't know if I'm going to have the time to be able to get up there before the colors, are gone. But we'll see.
Ooh.
I got to do some senior class photos for my son who's graduating in 2025, and we did talk about doing something like with the colors, with the fall colors. But we'll see.
Oh, that'd be a cool project that both of you could do.
Yeah. Hey, folks, don't forget to follow us on all social medias so you're up to date with the latest news in the firearms industry. You can find us, of course, on Facebook, Concealed Carry. Concealed Carry is just our handle on Facebook. ConcealedCarry.com, of course, on YouTube. Concealed Carry Inc. on Twitter or X and on Instagram. So be sure to give us a follow and share the podcast with your friends, family, coworkers, fellow, like-minded Second Amendment supporting firearms, self-defense related folks. Apologize for the lack of podcast episodes the last couple of weeks. Many of you probably know we just got through the Guardian Conference. And a little bit before that, we had the Active Self-Protection National Conference. Both very, very busy seasons for us. We've had a lot going on behind the scenes as well here. So thank you for your patience. Hope to be a little bit more on top of it and able to get the podcast out to you weekly. Okay, so all right, let's get to our sponsors today are KSG Armory Holsters. Thank you, KSG Armory Holsters. And for the finest holsters that we think, of course, I was just helping make some just a little bit ago here in the shop on the other side of that wall. So check them out. KSGArmory.com is the website. Heckler Koch, or HK, is more commonly known, perhaps. HKUSA.com is a website. Please support them. I can't put that link in the show notes because some of the sites that the podcast goes out on will not like that, including YouTube, since it directly links to a firearm manufacturer. And also CCWSafe.com. CCW Safe for the best self-defense legal coverage plans available. That's what I use. It's what a lot of our team here uses. Go to ccwsafe.com. And of course, they were the title sponsor or the main sponsor of the presenting sponsor of the 2024 Guardian Conference, and will continue to be, I believe, sponsoring that as well as in 2025. And I'll also just mention, folks, we opened up for super early bird registration during the weekend of the conference for signups for the conference in 2025. In 2025 is the first year that we are establishing a cap on attendees. We've had the event for a couple of years now. We didn't know, what our capacity was, and we know what that number is now, at least with our current resources of what we can do at the current venue and with everything that we got going on. So what I can tell you is we are half sold out already for the 2025 Guardian Conference. I would encourage you strongly to go to guardianconference.com and sign up for the 2025 Guardian Conference to make sure you get a ticket, because I do believe we are going to sell out. In fact, I know we are going to sell out for the 2025 Guardian Conference. So get after that, because we're already half sold out. And right now, the best price you can get, and the best price is to be a member of Guardian Nation, where you can save big time on your Guardian Conference ticket. So take advantage of the early bird pricing going on right now at guardianconference.com.
And the reason why, for sure, is because this is one of the easiest ways you can kind of build yourself on your self-defense platform. It doesn't matter what you're trying to improve on. Everything from pistol fighting to rifle fighting. We had shotgun this year. They had self-defense classes like hand-to-hand, medical classes. They had tactics and law. All the different types of aspects of being kind of well-rounded when it comes to self-defense. So if you are looking for a place to get the most out of your money, and you got to make yourself a little bit of a weekend to come and do some training with some incredible people, I think it is well worth it. We had a blast this year. I think it was almost a perfect event for me. Like my medical classes were better. I upgraded a couple of the things where we integrated like live fire along with the medical application. And so people had to shoot targets and then stop shooting targets and apply their own medical aid and then re-engage targets in kind of a tactical order of operation when it comes to applying your own medical in a self-defense situation. So, and I was spraying people with blood and yelling at them, and everybody really liked it. It was good. There's some things I want to improve on, some things I want to add to make it more fun and cooler. But so far, everybody really responded well to that kind of training. And that's the kind of stuff that you can expect at an event like this. You know, you're going to be able to do things you don't get to do on a flat range. You know, when you go to your local gun club where, you know, 1 round per second, no from the holster, you know, that's not this place. This place, you're in the dirt, you're rolling around, you're shooting and moving. And you have some incredible instructors that are walking you through some very complex things. And so if you're getting started and you want to come out and practice some things and kind of get yourself well-rounded, highly recommend it. It was a blast. So, yeah.
And I know that many folks were actually missing me from maybe a few were missing me from the conference this year.
Quite a few.
I had some family things at home to take care of and couldn't make it for the first time ever. Of course, Jacob couldn't make it to the first year's conference himself. Of course, he was sick. I actually had a sick child too, actually quite sick. We had our youngest that was down with a very, very high fever there for a good while. We were starting to get pretty worried about it, but fortunately, he has pulled through that. So that's nice. And we feel, much better about the situation with him. But hey, a couple things. We're kind of just doing a little recap of the conference. We segued from talking about it and promoting it and telling folks that we're 50% of the way sold out of next year's conference. So make sure, again, you get your tickets at guardianconference.com.
Did you say 60%? Holy crap.
About 50%, about half sold out.
Jeez.
Yep. I mentioned that CCW Safe is the presenting sponsor of the Guardian Conference. I want to recognize a few of our other sponsors. HK, a sponsor of this podcast, also a sponsor of the Guardian Conference. So thank you to their support. This is their first year supporting the Guardian Conference directly. Thank you so much, HK. Holosun. So I'm actually taking the opportunity right now to recognize first-year sponsors. Holosun was huge, stepped up in a big way, sent us some optics for prize giveaways. That's another thing too, folks. HK gave away, I think, 2 guns. Holosun gave away a bunch of optics. They also provided a ton of optics for use in our carbine classes to go on the rifles that were provided by another first-year sponsor, which is Santan Tactical out of Texas. It provided a great rifle setup for our carbine classes, which we had for the first time ever, and they were a huge hit. Taurus, another first-year sponsor, gave, I think, 4 guns for us to give away or something like that. So thank you so much. Another first-year sponsor, Taurus. Blue Force Gear, another first-year sponsor, sent us a bunch of slings for the rifles in those carbine classes and came through clutch, did that last minute, got us slings. So we had rifles from Santan, optics from Holosun, and Blue Force Gear slings on some really great rifles. Mossberg, another first-year sponsor, sent us 9 shotguns to run in our first ever shotgun courses. So that was another really huge, just hugely appreciated win from another sponsor, Mossberg. And then let's see, I think that I get all the first-year sponsors. I think that was all of our first-year sponsors. Other sponsors we want to recognize: Mountain Men Medical, Throom Targets, Barrel Block, Firearm Trainers Association, Supervel Ammunition. That was their second year. They provided a lot of ammunition that students bought ahead of time, and it was shipped out to the event for them. They got a little bit of a discount off that. And Supervel also provided all the ammunition our instructor shot. Tactical RX glasses, Range Tech shot timers, Gunfighter gun oil, EDC Belt Company, Oklahoma City Gun Club, which is the location where the event's held. Palm Industries, which makes the Palm pepper spray. Iron Soldiers Coffee Company, I think this was their second year sponsoring, so thank you to them for coming back. Health Markets Insurance Agency, awesome to have them a part of it again. I think this is their second year. And Ready Up Gear, that was our sponsor list, and we promised them we would recognize them on the podcast. So thank you for your patience, listeners, and please consider supporting these wonderful companies for supporting us and supporting the Guardian Conference, which was, as Brian just highlighted, a fantastic event this year. I heard nothing but just rave reviews from everybody about this year's event. It just keeps getting bigger and better each year.
It was an experience. What is this? This is our fourth year. Every year it's gotten progressively better, but this time I think everything was just kind of ramped up to an extra level. It was a blast. I had a great time.
Yeah. Again, don't delay. 50% sold out already. We do have, for the first time ever in 2025, a cap on attendees. So it will sell out for next year's event. And it will be bigger and better than the 2024 event. So look forward to that. Anything else you want to say about the conference, Brian?
Nope. I think that's it. It's awesome. You should go.
You did a great job in kind of doing an overview or giving us a report back, a recap on this year's event. You mentioned some of the classes, like we have some legal classes. We had some pepper spray and managing unknown contacts that was done. We typically have some combatives courses. Our combatives instructor, unfortunately, had an emergency come up in his circle, in his community, that he couldn't make it to the event last minute. We had a wonderful instructor, Dan Brady from Apache Solutions, step in last minute. We tried hard to find somebody that could cover and do combatives classes. That didn't work out this go around. That was a bit unfortunate. However, Dan Brady stepped up and offered a vehicle defense course, which we haven't had that before either. So that was a really cool thing to have come in kind of last minute to the conference. That's the thing, sometimes emergencies happen and we have to adapt and overcome those. You should all know that we remain always committed to providing the best quality education and content that's presented at our conference each year. And just wonderful, fabulous instructors that are a part of that each year as well. Some of those same instructors will return for 2025, and we always try to add, a couple of new ones each year as well. We like to have some new content, some new courses come in. We like to have some of the same, and some of those same courses, Brian, come back year after year after year. And I know some of our attendees are kind of like, well, I did that before. I attended that last year. There's some of these classes, legal classes. Now, there's a lot of different ways we can switch legal classes up and present and teach things differently or in a different way or different content a little bit. But some of the courses, like, Chuck Hager teaches our pepper spray and less lethal course and teaches a managing unknown contacts course. That falls into something that we would consider to be a secondary self-defense skill. And those sort of things are so important. So many of the courses in the Guardian Conference are very much firearms focused, and for a reason, because firearms is a hard skill, meaning it's not a soft skill. It's something that requires legit, honest to goodness skill development for you to get good at handling and shooting and running a gun. And it's something you don't want to screw up, right? So it's a very important thing. So we have a lot of firearms focused courses at the Guardian Conference. However, firearms aren't the only thing that's important. There's a lot of secondary skills that are also really important. And these are so important that you're going to probably always see some of these same things be taught year after year after year, maybe with some variations or some tweaks to them, to make it a little different or unique year to year where possible. But sometimes it's like, hey, we want our people to get training on the use of pepper spray and less lethal tools. So, and even if you've attended that in years past, like, you should do it again. It's a refresher. That's like this. The conference is a huge opportunity to get refresher courses, to come back and be like, you know what? Every year I do a combatives class. Maybe you're not in a position where you can attend weekly or twice a week or 3 times a week jiu-jitsu or some other kind of, Krav or whatever, which would be good if you could do that. But hey, if you can at least get some kind of refresher at the conference each year, that's not a bad idea. Get a refresher on pepper spray, get a refresher on managing unknown contacts. And what is that? Well, we could talk about that under, some of the secondary skills we're going to discuss. That'd probably fall more under a mental fitness sort of thing. It's kind of a communication skill. It's an awareness thing, but it's definitely a secondary skill. So anyway, the point is, today's topic that we're going to get into now is talking about essential secondary skills. What are some of those? And how you might go about training them or learning them or finding resources to support those skills. What do you think, Brian? Where should we start talking about secondary skills?
Well, I love this topic because one of the things that I think about is, what is our purpose and philosophy when it comes to what we're doing? And our idea is self-defense. Like, how are we defending ourselves better? So we have to approach this from that kind of a category. And if we only focus on one particular aspect of that self-defense, which tends to be, shooting, a lot of people out there trying to get really fast and accurate with their shooting, and I don't have a problem with that. However, there is a difference between what we're doing and why we're doing it. If we're trying to do for self-defense, then we have to approach this as a very kind of a holistic approach. It's a multifaceted, very dangerous and dynamic situations that are occurring, and we have to approach this from many different angles. Skills are perishable. I like to think about skills as like tools in a toolbox. If I leave those rattling around, those skills, I learn them one time, and then I leave those skills in my toolbox, they just rattle around, and eventually they're just going to get dull. And if I'm in an emergency and I need that skill right now, I pull that out and it's all rusted up and dull. That's not going to work for me very well in the situation, right? So what do I have to do? If I'm really trying to commit myself to maintaining a high level of self-awareness for my self-defense, then I need to hone those skills on a regular basis or a semi-regular basis where I'm pulling those skills out, I'm reevaluating them, making sure that the information is still up to date, because a lot of these things can change, the way philosophies and things can change. So by staying up on top of those skills, you're a little bit more able to approach self-defense in a way that will actually work for you when you're confronted with a situation. And we want to make sure that we have other skills available to us besides our weapons, right? If the only tool that we have in our toolbox is a hammer, then every problem that we see is going to be a nail, right? So we want to have a variety of options available to us. Can we communicate our way out of this situation? Can we be super aware of our situation so that we can extract ourselves so we don't even have to be confronted with that situation ahead of time? There's lots of things that we could do besides just the, manipulation of a weapon. And while that's still important, we can kind of look at things in that perspective so that we get the greatest benefit for what we're doing.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. We had a good comment here. I actually hit it, but bring it back up again from Joseph on YouTube. He said, not a lot of free time in my life, but good secondary skills are muscular strength and endurance, along with high intensity interval cardio. I absolutely agree with that. I mean, and we have that listed in our list of secondary skills. Maybe this takes us a little bit out of order, Brian, but why don't we start real quick? Because I think this is probably one of the most basic ones of these essential, secondary skills, which is your physical fitness, your actual physical fitness. because we can talk about hand to hand and less lethal and medical and all that. But number one, like I need to make sure I'm taking care of me, making sure that physically I'm in as good a shape as I can be. This is not something that's easy. It's not, and it's even less easy for certain people depending on where you are in your stage of life, or maybe you've had some recent physical injuries, or various medical problems that can complicate this dramatically. And so, to be clear, I want to make sure we're not here to judge anybody physically or fitness wise, because I know it can be a sensitive subject. It's something that I've done a little bit better myself in the last year or so, of getting myself more into shape, getting my cardio doing a lot better, losing some weight for me, which has been a huge benefit to me physically. And so, but yeah, let's talk about physical fitness, Brian. I mean, you listed it here on our list. Talk about the secondary skill of physical fitness.
Uh, in my opinion, this is the primary skill of self-defense. It's not really a secondary.
Hmm.
This one trumps all other aspects of self-defense, in my opinion. Um, Even gunfighting. If you don't do anything else for your self-defense besides workout, I mean, you're doing really good. One, it allows you the ability to run away. That's a very important skill in self-defense, right?
Hmm.
And if you're able to pay attention to your surroundings and you see that threat coming and you can scoot your booty to some other location, then that's very ideal. And on top of that, being able to pull yourself over things is a very important skill to have. On top of being able to get people off of you, it makes you stronger. If you get an injury, your body is in its best, healthiest form in order to recover from that injury. And overall, your life and your overall health and well being, of course, is improved by that. So you're
Hmm.
protecting yourself long term as well as short term. So, in my opinion, I would say this would be the primary self defense skill. If you don't put any effort into anything else, I think this one would be the best one to prioritize your time.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really disagree with anything you said. It, and things like when we get into other secondary skills, and I like how you described it. It's a primary skill. Yeah, that is true. Um, when we get into other secondary skills like hand to hand or combatives and things of that nature, I mean, physical fitness is going to be an important part of that, right? And also, one of the number one self defense minded tactics, if you will, is to just run away if you can.
It's called a tactical retreat, and it's totally okay. It's totally okay.
Right? There's a time and place for that. I mean, we have to make the right call for our respective situations we might find ourselves in. But if I can avoid getting into a fight, into a gunfight, or any kind of fight, I'd rather avoid that, because the personal, the physical, and even the legal risk of getting involved in something, I want to avoid those risks if I can. Now, eh, there's times that it can't be avoided. Like, we recognize that, and there's times where a gun is the solution to a problem. But there's a time where it's like, I'm getting myself the heck out of here. And if your physical fitness is such that permits that, then that's a good thing. Like, we should encourage that. Again, I recognize not everybody can run, or run very well, or run very fast, or run very far. Maybe you got problems with your knees, problems with your hips, you're overweight. Okay, and not necessarily always by okay, I'm going to touch on that because it's a bit of a sensitive subject for me, Brian. Uh, there's a lot of times, and it seems to be from the younger crowd, the younger uh, crowd that is where this is less of an issue. As you get older, you start to recognize, how things can degrade physically. What just because you get old, but a lot of times I'll hear comments said, to something to the effect of, well, you're overweight. We'll do something about that. Like implying that it's a choice. It's not always a choice. I have some dear friends. I have a friend that injured her foot, her ankle, got in a severe infection inner foot, had to have partial amputation, has still not fully recovered from that, and can't go walking and running and doing, there's things that can be done, but it's now like 2 times, 3 times, 4 times harder because can't there's not the mobility, to do those things. It's harder to get your cardio up, not being able to use your legs the way you want to be able to use them, and things of that nature. And so there's just sometimes things that happen that put us in a position where it becomes really challenging to be in the physical shape that we want to be in. And I think it's important we recognize that and even honor people that are in situations like that. I think it's also, fair to recognize that sometimes people make excuses about things, and it's good for us to be honest with ourselves about, where am I making excuses, if any? What can I do? And I'll tell you, even if you just do the little things, do what you can do, regardless of the situation you're in, to at least maintain your physical fitness. The one thing we don't want to do is go backwards, right? Backwards is not where we want to go, because that doesn't do anybody any good, in terms of, whether we're talking about a fighting context or just talking about longevity of life and wanting to live a fruitful life. I'm reminded of there used to be a guy in our neighborhood, and I think he's moved now. I haven't seen him in a while. But I remember seeing him, he initially, the few times I saw him, he was just sitting out in a chair in front of his house, and he was quite overweight. Older gentleman, really overweight, just like whatever. And he seemed friendly enough and might wave to him as you go by or whatever. And then one day I noticed he was out in his driveway, and he didn't have a very big driveway. He was just walking laps in his driveway. And then I noticed about every time I would drive by, he wasn't going very fast and he wasn't going very far in terms of like covering linear distance. He's just walking laps in his driveway, like walking around his car. And first couple times I didn't think anything of it. And then I'm like, wait a minute, this is a pattern. Dude just keeps walking laps in his driveway. And then I started noticing it. Like, it didn't matter what time of day I went by, he'd be out there walking laps. And then I noticed he was getting a little bit lighter and a little bit thinner. And then I noticed he started to walk a little bit more quickly. And then eventually started walking, not just laps in his driveway, but actually like walking, linear distance, if you will. It was like walking through the neighborhood. And dude lost a lot of weight. And I'm sure it was accompanied with probably some dietary changes and things of that nature. It was really kind of inspirational to see, because I remember just thinking, here's a guy that, took every opportunity he had to just go out and just walk around his driveway. I think I would get bored with that, personally speaking, like just round and round and round. But like, kudos to him for making the decision at some point. And I could tell that he was hurting at times and in pain, and he pushed through it, and eventually I think things got easier for him. At least I'd like to think so. He looked like he was moving better, the last couple times I saw him. So that may not even be possible for some people, but just depending on what kind of physical limitations or restrictions you're working with. But the point is to take care of yourself as best you can, to do what you can, to be in as good of condition as you can be, because better physical fitness means that you can be a better fighter. Makes everything else easier.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that first step is the hardest. Like and setting yourself a very small accomplishable goal if you're trying to get started in this area and maintain those good habits. I know something that works for me is just giving myself something small. One of the first things that I used to do is bite off way more than I could chew, pick this huge workout program and get really intense and crazy about it. But you tend to see better results if you just pick something small changes to your physical activity and your nutrition, and then just build on that, because eventually that'll get easy and it'll be encouraging because you begin to see those crazy results, and that helps you to kind of make those other changes, and you kind of just work your way into healthy lifestyle, or so to speak.
Right. Awesome. Good thoughts. We don't want to spend too much time on any one particular thing due to the nature of topics that we have here listed.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and shift gears to, let's keep it, I guess, focused on the individual. I mean, all these things are kind of individual things, but like looking inward, what about mental fitness?
Ooh, I think in my opinion, this one is a lot about conflict resolution,
Hmm.
and ego management. You know,
Hmm.
what types of things am I willing to get in a fight over? Um, I think that's something that you always have to keep that in the back of your mind, because if you do that, that limits the having to use these other skills in a self-defense situation. You know, if I can keep myself in check and I have somebody that is challenging my ego, but I don't care because I'm not willing to fight over that because that's not important to me, then I'm much more likely to survive and go about my day and have an excellent week. But if I'm not very aware of myself and how I am interacting with the world and the way that my ego might be presenting me with some problems, I think that's something that we should probably pay attention to. Conflict resolution, the verbal judo. How do I talk my way out of a bad situation where somebody else's ego becomes my problem?
Hmm.
That's a danger because we can control our own actions, but we don't have control over everybody else's actions. So, how can I calm this situation down, use my verbal judo to outsmart my opponent so that I don't have to resort to my self-defense combat skills and medical skills, and that kind of thing. So that's the way I would tend to approach this one.
Yep. Yeah. I think you're hitting that, pretty much spot on. Again, I mentioned how we have, like, at the Guardian Conference, Chuck Hager teaching managing unknown contacts. So unknown contacts, strangers. It's basically stranger danger, tactics, if you will. Uh, I've been going on a daily walk with my wife, and actually, usually about 2 walks a day. We try to get in, one in the relatively early morning and one at night. And so we encounter a lot of folks that we don't often encounter during some of our walks. And I remember there was one time she pointed out a gentleman that looked definitely pretty sketchy. You know, I hadn't picked up on him yet, but she had seen him before, and she's like, "That guy kind of gives me the creeps," sort of thing. And it's like, okay, yep, I see why for sure. And so you start, just learning to recognize things that seem out of place, people that seem out of place, people that don't seem quite right. Whether the you know whether it's more of a, no, they don't seem quite right from like a behavior standpoint. Something's off behaviorally. Uh, in other words, they act kind of weird or creepy in some way. And also, it could be something as simple as they're dressed in a fashion that doesn't make sense for the context, right? Someone that's wearing really, hot clothing or cold weather clothing in a hot environment, that's odd. That doesn't make sense. That's a red flag. Things of that nature, right? Or they just don't look like they belong. I was just about actually going to touch on this. Joseph commented here, emotional control is a skill because I can tell you from personal experience, shooting without emotion in the self-defense situation is almost impossible, but a teachable thing. Yes, I think it extends beyond just shooting, like being able to, shoot in a self-defense situation and retain emotional control. I think emotional control has to be present and must exist before a gun is ever even a part of anything. And emotional control is a huge part of avoiding getting into problems in the first place. I think it's a huge mental fitness component that a lot of people need to work on. We see so many examples in today's society of lack of emotional control. Almost every single road rage incident that I come across is almost certainly an example of a lack of emotional control. We basically start acting like kindergartners on a playground because somebody slighted us by cutting us off or driving aggressively or something. And then we basically turn into the thing that we're complaining about, meaning that person is driving like an idiot. And now I'm mad about it. And so now I'm going to drive like an idiot in return as I try to, I don't know, win some kind of ego battle between us, and who's in the right here, sort of thing. And that's another big one. As part of emotional control, I think where people get in trouble a lot of times is sort of this inner sense of justice that something must be righted here, and it is my duty to right, the scales of justice in the universe with some silly little thing that's happened.
No one does that to me.
Right, right. And so sometimes, like, actually, I'd say a lot of times it's wise to just let things go. Just, all right, cool, all right, bro, have a nice day, sort of thing. And that's a lot of the sort of things that Chuck Hager gets into with his managing unknown contacts class. That's a lot of things, like you mentioned verbal judo, Brian.
Paul Sharp had a really great story about this. He was supposed to do our our combatives class this last conference, and
Mhm.
he had to cancel. But he had a story where he was getting his elderly mother into the car. And she's like in her late 80s, and they're at the grocery store, and she's getting into the passenger, and she accidentally bumps the other car with her car door,
Yeah.
and the other passenger, or the driver of that car, jumps out and starts screaming at her and calling her a whole bunch of names, and some
Right.
really horrible things. And she's just an elderly lady. She didn't mean it, or anything, and she's just scared. And then her son Paul comes over, to diffuse the situation. And if you don't know Paul Sharp, the man oozes lethality. Like,
Right.
he is a tough dude. He's as tough as it gets. He's a hard man who has done some hard things. And he could have absolutely just pulled this other person apart quickly and easily. And some might say justified to do so from somebody who's acting very aggressive to their mother. I in my personal case, I think I've got some decent self-control, but if somebody was coming at my mom like that, I would have a very
Mhm.
difficult time not adjusting that person's attitude, but that's not the proper thing. And Paul Sharp, who is a highly experienced at violence, he understands that it was better for him to just say, I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
apologize for that. I'm going to get my mom out of this situation. I'm sorry. Even though that guy probably deserved a few punches in the mouth, Paul Sharp, knew that violence is not worth it for him. And I
Yeah.
think that's an important thing to kind of, keep in the back of your mind. What are we doing and why are we doing it?
Absolutely. Yes, what you just said right there is so key, because what you just explained or described is really a matter of keeping perspective of, like, what are my priorities? What are my absolute number one priorities? And keeping things in check in that regard, keeping things in perspective. Because it's really easy in the heat of the moment when you're upset, you're amped up, your blood pressure and your heart rate's running high, to forget what is actually important, to lose perspective, to be so focused on, whatever is happening in the moment, that's the most important thing in the universe, when it's not. Because what's more important is me getting home in one piece to my family. What's more important is minimizing my liability, so I don't find myself either in some kind of lawsuit, or worse, in some kind of criminal case. Because I mean, I could point you to, I mean, we hate talking about them, but the reality is, where most, like the vast majority of concealed carriers, people with actual permits to carry concealed, are law-abiding citizens that don't break the law, are some of the most law-abiding people on planet Earth. And yet there's a handful of them every year that end up in prison and give everybody else a bad name, because in the heat of a moment of some kind of situation where somebody offended them or whatever, they lose sight of what's important and lose perspective and fail to stick to their mission. Meaning, what's my mission? Well, my mission is, number one, making sure I'm there for my family, making sure I support my family, making sure I'm there for my kids and my wife. And I can't do that if I'm sitting behind bars, or if I just got sued out of existence, because it's not just criminal liability we have to be concerned about, it's civil liability too. And in today's world, people are all too happy, both prosecutors, to charge people aggressively, okay, and as well as attorneys that are happy to get on board with going after somebody in a civil lawsuit,
Yeah,
right?
you should listen to some of these people that talk about, like, after the shooting. Like, the nightmare doesn't end after the shooting.
Right.
Like,
That's
the
right.
nightmare begins there, And
Yep.
the horrible parts that come to people after, something, this as serious as a self-defense shooting is just, it's a rough gig. So understanding, that, I think that helps a lot.
100%. Brian, we've mostly only touched on physical and mental fitness thus far in
Right.
today's episode, and we haven't even gotten to your favorite thing yet, which would be something to do with basic emergency or medical related
Medical.
skills. Uh, we could talk about less lethal some more. We could talk about hand to hand. We could probably also identify a couple other things to discuss. I'm kind of thinking that maybe we could plan a part two.
I dig that. I think, yeah, those are all things that we can continue to talk about at length, and I think a part two would be acceptable.
Yeah. And I'm saying that because I do have kind of a hard stop here. We got kicked off a little bit late due to some connectivity problems with my computer and the internet here. But I did want to have you, I wanted to give you the opportunity because I know that you had a quote that you prepared. And I think it would be good to maybe start wrapping it up and close by letting you share what your thoughts were on this. And we can discuss that for a moment or two.
Perfect. Yeah, so I think this one is a good one, and I kind of like it because it has a little bit of historical. I got a little bit of the historical background behind it, and the quote goes: "A jack of all trades is a master of none, though oftentimes better than a master of one."
Mm,
And this phrase is often used to describe somebody who is a generalist rather than a specialist and is adept of many things. It originated in Elizabethan English back in 1592, but I think I also read that it could be traced back as far as 1309, but don't quote me on that. And so it was originally used to, or people have used it in a negative light in the past, but it was originally intended as a compliment, meaning that a jack of all trades is a master of integration, which
mhm.
means he can bring the disciplines of all of the various trades together in a practical way. And I think, that is kind of what we want to achieve with our path of the warrior, because that's what we're doing here. We're studying the path of a warrior, and there's a lot of various little components that goes into that, and we need to be putting a little bit of time and energy into that as we focus on our training so that we are well rounded. And there's a lot that goes into it. Be a smart warrior, be a strong warrior, and be a well disciplined warrior.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that and also sharing some of the background behind that quote, which is one that probably most everybody is familiar with or has heard at least at some point in their lives. I have for most of my life not shied away from the idea of being a jack of all trades, so to speak. I have enjoyed, like, one of the things that's brought me a lot of satisfaction in my life is pursuing new skills, if you will. Actually, I was talking with my wife last night about this a little bit, and she, just commented about how, just to use it as an example, it's a firearms related example. She's like, she remembered how a number of years ago, she's like, you wanted to learn about reloading, and she's like, you just went out and taught yourself. And of course, I read some books and I watched some videos and different things too, but basically taught myself to reload ammo. And I've reloaded now for and it's off and on. I'm not always reloading, sort of as an on needed basis. Uh, but but it's something I've been doing now for well over a decade. Golly, probably it's been since I lived in Idaho. So probably 16, 17, 18 years that I've been reloading. And, just, hey, I want to learn how to do that. All right, let's go do it. There's another skill in the bucket, so to speak, and I think that it's really good to have multiple skills to be able to learn how to integrate those. I think it aids a person in being able to problem solve because you can look at problems and be like, okay, because I have a background in these different disciplines, you can sort of like see how the world all comes together and you can find things that have, connections that might not be so readily obvious to someone that's more of a specialist. And you can go, hey, I can use a skill from, this thing, this part of my life to sort of help fix this problem somewhere else or integrate things together to create comprehensive and innovative solutions as well. And so, and I think the thing is just because you have a lot of different skills does not necessarily mean you can't focus on one or two of those to a high degree and make those more of like your specialty, but yet you still have all of these other skills too that you're good at, that you're competent at, you know what I mean? And so this topic comes up occasionally where I'll see people online, in like online forums and things talking about firearm skills and sort of degrading those that put a lot of effort into becoming highly skilled shooters because they're like, well, there's other important things to focus on. And it's like, well, yes, that's true. How do you know those people aren't learning those other skills too? Like, and the thing is it possible that a person can be highly skilled at one or two things, but yet still be very competent at a number of the other things? And so it applies here into suggesting, like, there's people that would argue that hand-to-hand skills, for instance, is way more important than learning how to shoot a gun. That it's more likely to be needed or used or something to that effect. So you should put way more effort into learning how, to actually fight with your hands. An argument can be made to that effect. It doesn't mean you have to disregard the firearm or the shooting skills. And it doesn't mean that you can't be a highly skilled shooter and not also be competent at hand-to-hand. So that's just kind of like my little input, I guess, to, your quote made me think of that we don't have to be a this or that kind of mindset when it comes to skill building. I think that it's good to look at what are some of the skills we can learn out of, all these different skills, and what are some of the things that I have the ability to learn right now, and that also maybe have interest to me. There's nothing wrong. I mean, like, we have whole armies in the course of history that have been built where there were specialists, there were archers, for instance. That was their thing, learning how to fire arrows, right? That was their specialty. Didn't mean that they weren't capable of, fighting in other ways. But then you have other, you had your knights, let's say, riding a horseback and armed with a sword or whatever, So, like, you can build whole armies and communities of people. Like, we can look at this from a community standpoint, Brian, where it's like, in my community, I might be the go-to guy where it comes to gun stuff, right? But I got a neighbor that is hugely prepared with being able to, he's got a lot of survivalist type skills. Cool. Awesome. Guess what? We can team up and do some really, good stuff. And then you get, a guy that's very mechanically inclined and can, assemble things and fix things and weld things or whatever, right? I mean, like, you can build whole communities around people with specialties, and those communities will be also even better and stronger when it's not specialists where that's the only thing they do, but that's something that they're really good at, and that they can also help out in other ways. I think builds really, really strong communities and strong families to, for that matter, as well, as I'm thinking about it. And I'm just thinking about this from like hey, there's a lot of turmoil and craziness going on in the world right now. And, I got some friends in my community that I know if, the crap hit the fan, I could link up with some of those friends and we can be pretty strong together because of the skill sets that we bring to the table.
Yeah, I think if you focus on these categories, you will be that type of person who can handle pretty much everything. It will increase your confidence at a massive level. And
Yeah.
because of that, you'll be less anxious at day to day, and you go out there into the public. I'm not concerned because I know I got it.
Right.
I'm well trained that if something does happen, I'll be able to handle it much better than 90% of the population that's out there because I have
Absolutely.
a basic skill set. And you don't have to put that much time and energy into it, just a little bit into each one of these categories, and you'll be much better off than 90% of the population out there.
Yeah. Yep. Fantastic. Well, that's going to be a good place to end. And again, we'll try to bring you a part 2 and talk about some of the other essential secondary skills that we think that you should have, or that you should, look at studying yourself. Again, today's episode is sponsored by KSG Army Holsters, HK, and CCW Safe. You can support them. Again, I'll go ahead and provide their links real quick. KSGArmory.com HK is hkusa.com, and CCW Safe, ccwsafe.com. All pretty simple and straightforward website names. As always, we'd love to encourage you to subscribe to the podcast, and make sure you turn on your notifications. So the little bell, if you click that, if you're doing this on YouTube, you can then say you want to get notified all the time. And on Facebook, where we also do this live, you can click that notification icon and tell it that you want it to be notified every time we go live with the podcast. So you don't miss a podcast if you want to catch us live. If you're just listening to the after recording, the podcast, the audio feed only, we appreciate you, and of course hope you subscribe there as well. And if you care enough to leave us a review, particularly a positive review, that's always appreciated on iTunes or any of the podcast players. That's always a fantastic thing that we love and appreciate. You're always also welcome to, you can go directly to concealedcarry.com/podcast review. That makes that easier. You can also contact us by going to concealedcarry.com/contact, or shooting us an email at podcast@concealedcarry.com. Brian, thank you for being a part of this with me today.
Well, thanks for having me. It was my pleasure. I think we had some good topics there.
Absolutely. As typically, we had plenty to discuss. So, and there's never any shortage of such things. So we will do this again. Until next time, folks, though, train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care.